webinar celebrating women leadership in health IT. My name is Melissa Mio, and I'm a past president of New England Himss and a current board member participating in the programs committee, which provides great speakers like our moderator and panel today. I am also a healthcare application sales manager at Oracle in the human capital space. It's my pleasure to introduce our panel today. And we have Beth Downey, Chief Information Officer of Newton Wellesley Hospital in Newton, Mass., a member of Mass General Brigham System. Lisa Ewing, she's Chief Information Officer at Lynn Community Health Center in Lynn, Massachusetts, and one of the largest community health centers within Massachusetts. Naomi Linane, Chief Information Officer and Vice President of Information Services at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston, Massachusetts. And we have Angie Mathau, Associate Vice President and Chief Information Officer for South County Health in Wakefield, Rhode Island. All lines have been muted upon entry today. Please send all your questions via the Q&A, and we will do our best to answer them throughout today's session. Thank you, and please join me in welcoming today's panel.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you to the New England Himss for having us today and celebrating women leadership in health IT. I have a great panel here today, and I know we're going to have a great discussion because our initial discussion when we were getting introduced, we had a lot of fun talking and kind of ran over time a little bit, so it's going to be great today. We're going to start off with a brief introduction of each of us, a description of our organization, our role, and how long we've been there. So I'll kick us off by saying that I am Lisa Ewing. I'm the CIO at Lynn Community Health Center. We are a federally qualified health center in Lynn, Massachusetts, one of the largest community health centers in Massachusetts. We have a very large behavioral health practice, and we provide a wide variety of services for the city of Lynn. We have about 40,000 patients. I've been there for 8.5 years now. I am the first CIO at the health center, so it's been a really unique journey, and the pandemic has made that even more interesting this past year. So I'm going to turn it over to Angie and have her introduce herself.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, everyone. I'm Angie Matthew, and I am the CIO at South County Health. South County is in Wakefield, Rhode Island, so small bottom corner of the state, if you're familiar with us. I actually started here in February of this year, so still new, still feel like I'm learning the organization. It's been an exciting ride, as you can imagine, just starting somewhere new right as a pandemic started to hit. So interesting time, but really glad to be here. And prior to coming to South County, I spent most of my career at in Connecticut at community hospitals. So South County is a 100-bed hospital. We also have a medical group and a home care service, and just a really great community hospital, still independent here in Rhode Island. And I'm a Rhode Island native, so I'm really happy to be here back in my home state. And I will, I guess, hand over to Beth.
Excellent, thank you. So my name is Beth Downey. I'm the CIO at Newton Wellesley Hospital. So Newton Wellesley is, as was said originally, a member of Mass General Brigham, which is formerly Partners Healthcare. So we're a 330-bed community teaching hospital in Newton, Massachusetts. We have about 3,400 employees and about 1,000 physicians, both employed and private, that we support. We have your normal services that you'd see from a community hospital: OB, maternity, orthopedics, cardiovascular, cancer center, surgery. All of that. I've been at Newton Wellesley for 21 years, but I've been the CIO just for the last 9. So I started in October of '99 as an analyst, and I continued to assume additional leadership responsibilities, and I was promoted to the CIO in September of 2011. So I lead an amazing team of 40 IS staff and 15 telecommunications staff that support our community.
Great. So thanks, Beth. It's Naomi Linane. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. So as mentioned, I'm the CIO and VP of IS for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, which is the top cancer center in New England. And we were recently rated as 3rd in the world for cancer hospitals. So that was exciting news just last week. We are both a hospital and a research, academic research organization. I've been at Dana-Farber. It will be 18 years tomorrow. So happy anniversary to me. But I have only been the CIO for about 3 of those 18 years. My team is 140 staff focusing on all of the clinical and business operational systems and users, desktop and infrastructure, information security. We have a strategic planning and performance office, and we also manage some of the non-traditional sort of healthcare IT aspects of the hospital, which is philanthropy. So not everyone is managing philanthropy systems. So it's sort of an interesting aspect to the work that we do on my team. And we do work collectively with research and analytics informatics teams at Dana-Farber to sort of collectively provide support for all services, both sort of patient care and research.
Great, thank you, ladies. As you can see, we have a wide range of experiences here. And I know we all took different paths to get to where we were. So, ladies, what path did you take to get to this position, and who mentored you along the way?
I'll take a stab at it first. So as I mentioned, I started out my career in healthcare 20 years ago at a small community hospital in Norwich, Connecticut. I was a programmer. I actually was initially hired to code the infamous Y2K date changes, which I found extremely boring, but it really did help me learn the programming world. But beyond that, then we kind of went on a journey to select a new EMR. I took on different roles as an analyst to help implement our Meditech EHR back then at that hospital, and just other system implementations along the way. And about 10 years later, at that job, a new CIO, female CIO, was hired. And she really did see something in me, I guess. And so she gave me my first management opportunity, and she really did help mentor me along the rest of the way in my career there. She challenged me. She presented me with things that I never thought I could do. And as they say, it's in those fearful moments that you start to grow. So I always recognize her for that. It was really opportunities. I sort of had a background more in financial systems, applications, and she sort of pushed me to learn the clinical side of the healthcare IT world. And she was a nurse, so I think just having that mentorship really helped me excel in my career there. And then this was my first opportunity to be a CIO, so I really thank her for that support she gave me.
That's great.
Excellent. I'm happy to go next. So I actually had never had a dream of working in IT or healthcare. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. I applied for every job that said all majors may apply. And I got hired at Meditech, like a lot of people that are now in healthcare IT, especially in Massachusetts. We started our careers at Meditech. It's a really great place to start. I was there for 3 years and then moved to another smaller software company in Massachusetts, and then dipped my toe into the actual hospital world. And because I implemented the billing accounts receivable system at Meditech, I worked as an analyst in a patient accounting department at a community hospital in Massachusetts. I had an amazing female director, who gave me my first leadership opportunity then. And then she decided she was moving to another community hospital in Massachusetts and wanted me to go with her. So I moved to a second hospital. And then a few years after that, I actually moved my first time as an IT role. And that's when I moved in October of '99 to Newton Wellesley. And during my 21 years, I'm the 5th CIO. So I had 4 CIOs during the first, I think it was 12 years. 3 of them were females, and they were all amazing. And then the final one was Scott McLean, who's a past president of New England Himss. And he was an amazing mentor for me and continued to give me more opportunities in my career. And then when he was promoted at Partners to the deputy CIO, he had named me as the interim and then encouraged me to apply for the CIO position. So it's been a very strange journey. And I always say I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up.
So Beth, I think, sort of nailed it when she said many of us in Massachusetts started at Meditech, because I did too, which, I think was a really great starting ground for lots of young professionals who didn't know they wanted to work in healthcare or in IT, which I think was also me, Beth. I was a major in politics and communications, so not sure how that prepared me for the CIO role, but maybe that's another panel. But again, as Angie and Beth both said, you know, I was very lucky to have many female leaders sort of to work for or with over the years. I mean, healthcare, you know, is known for, you know, having women leaders in Boston, especially, whether it's, you know, beyond the areas of nursing, and we have female presidents at many hospitals in Boston. So I think we've all been really lucky in this area to have a lot of females to look up to. I would say many of the women I've worked with were sort of unofficial mentors. So I'm not sure they knew they were mentoring me at the time, but I definitely sort of looked to them and tried to learn from each of them and sort of figure out what I needed to do. You know, I left Meditech, as I said, 18 years ago today, probably, since I started tomorrow at Dana-Farber. But I worked for women, you know, direct managers at both Meditech and at Dana-Farber, for the most part, have been women. So, and I've just, as I said, worked with a lot of other strong vice presidents, senior directors, you know, other levels where it's been women leaders, and have been able to observe sort of how do they handle difficult situations differently. So, you know, we're not all the same, and you learn a lot of tricks and tips from other female leaders. And I think for me, you know, the key to success at Dana-Farber, and I would say at Meditech as well, but what I really was taught by these other women leaders is to sort of go beyond your current role. You know, really dig into that part of your job description that says other duties as assigned. You know, go learn on that other project, or do that thing that sort of is not expected, because I do think that that is where you, you know, sort of learn to grow. You sort of come out of your comfort zone a little bit and figure out that you can sort of do more than maybe what you thought you could. And I think from a work perspective, you know, it allows you to learn about hospitals beyond your segment. So if you focus in clinicals only, you know, you need to learn about the financials and understand, like, how do we run a hospital as a business, and what are those aspects of it? And, you know, really trying to understand the before and after of what you do. And I think all of those approaches are things that other women sort of taught me along the way, to sort of don't pigeonhole yourself, don't just learn the one thing, you know, learn the broader business. So, you know, I think that's really what I've been doing for 18 years at Dana-Farber. And so hopefully, you know, people feel like now I have a broad sense of the organization as a whole. And I do owe that to quite a few women along the way who might be watching, since I told them all about it. So they know who they are.
That's really great. Some great advice there, Naomi. Yeah, unlike some of you, I did not come through Meditech, strangely enough, in the Boston area. But I know a lot of great people who've come through that area. I came to this role never thinking that I would be a CIO through being in radiology. I was a radiographer for many years, started getting involved in IT projects, went back and got my degree. And one of our past presidents, Mary Maloney, is one of the people who is the reason that I have the job I have today. And I don't hold that against her. But she was very supportive. Mary Finley was another name, another person who was very supportive. And a lot of you in the Boston area and health IT know of her. And I think it's one of the benefits we've had specifically in the New England area in being in healthcare. There are a lot of really strong women role models in leadership. So we have a lot to follow. So some really great stories. Thank you very much. Now that we're here, what can we do to develop the next generation of women and minorities in the STEM areas? How do we ensure continued diversity in our field.
So I'm happy to jump in and start. I think healthcare is a lot of times a lot of women, but technology isn't necessarily. So I think really making an effort to reach young girls, but boys too. Let's bring everybody in to technology at a younger age. I think is critical, at least for me. I grew up with my family working in healthcare, so I saw, female leaders and women in the hospital sort of making decisions and, running the show. Back then I thought I wanted to walk around with a clipboard and be cool. Who knew I'd be carrying a cell phone and a smartphone instead? But, that whole idea of really having kids see people in these roles, I think is what's so important. And my team has started to do some work with the United Way. The Boston United Way has a Boston STEM program where they bring middle schoolers to your organization, and you interact with them and they hear about what these jobs are. Because I think that's the other piece of it is, do boys, girls, everybody understand what these jobs are and what we do. And when STEM isn't just programmers or engineers or doctors, scientists, like that, there's so much more to the world of STEM. And how do we bring that to kids? How do we let them know that this world is out there? So that, they want to do this work in hospitals. They don't just want to be a programmer that gets to build games out in Silicon Valley, that there's, STEM that happens, in their own communities, at the hospital down the street, or, I have friends who work in STEM careers, for the town or the county or the state. Like, STEM is everywhere. And so how do you bring that message? And so, I do think there's a lot of organizations trying to do things for young people to really get that message out. And so that's sort of one of the places my team and I are trying to put some effort and time.
Yeah, I'm happy to go add some to that. So I was really fortunate last year to be asked at Newton Wellesley to chair our Workforce Development Council. So who would think, why is the CIO leading our Workforce Development Council? But I had a passion because I volunteered at their first career night that they had for high school students. And so the idea is to try to share information about careers in healthcare that aren't your typical nurse and doctor that a lot of times the students think about. So our career night is an opportunity. We really try to feature careers that are in healthcare, not specifically IT, but focusing on 2 years or less of additional schooling for students who may not have an opportunity financially or academically to go to a 4-year college. But we also have a partnership with the Waltham Partnership for Youth, and we've done our second summer intern program. We had 20 interns who, unfortunately, this year we had to change it to be a completely virtual internship. So they actually were able to take a biology course at Mass Bay Community College for credit, college credit, which is great. But then we had a lot of panel discussions similar to what we're doing here with all different types of careers. So we had some new physicians and nurses, new grad nurses, and a recent graduate from the pharmacy program. But we also featured a lot of careers that are not at the bedside to try to share more information about that, and including some IT focus. So I feel like it's just, how do we get the word out there that there are these jobs in hospitals and other healthcare areas that aren't doctors and nurses? There's so many opportunities.
Yep, and I'll just add, I know similarly, I haven't had the chance to participate here at this organization, but similar, outreach to the middle schools, the high schools, to bring kids in and help them understand what we do. I actually have 2 young daughters. They're 9 and 11. They have no idea what I do. I try to explain it to them, but they really, it's hard for them to understand what this means. And I think, they do relate back to technology being part of gaming or whatever the case might be. So it is hard at a young age to understand it, but I think as they grow into middle school and high school, it's a little bit easier. So I think that outreach to the community, I know we do have career days at our schools where we can actually go and speak to students as well. So, that's always a treat. I think it's a treat. And then, just really helping to explain it in a way that they can understand it at any age. That's the key, I think.
Great work. So a couple of the things that I do, I belong to the Big Sister Association, and I know we do a lot of outreach to young women specifically. I also have been involved with the group Year Up. We get interns from Year Up almost every year. One of my longest running tech support team was a Year Up graduate. That's a really great program to get underserved youth, young adults into some of it's IT, some of it's finance. They have a couple of other tracks, but that's really helpful too. And we're trying to do some work now with the Lynn Public Schools to get out and visit them more and let them know, especially young women, know that science is okay. Science is it's a good field for them, and they should look into that.
So Lisa, sorry, can I just jump in to say, I think the other part that is critical for people to think about, and I'm sure all of you do this as well when you're talking to folks about STEM. So STEM sounds scary to me because I don't like math. So I am not your sort of typical technology person. As Beth said, like this was not on the roadmap for the career, trajectory back in the day. But I do think it's, and what I do think women do really well, frankly, is tie the sort of soft skills of leadership to STEM careers. So there's a lot of great leaders out there who are also men and can do this well, but, really helping kids see that, science is critical, engineering, math, all these things are super critical, but it doesn't mean that you're sitting in a lab staring at a microscope all day long. Like you can be involved in science and math and do jobs that are still a little creative or a little more sort of public speaking or whatever those things are that you also like. And I think that that's another big aspect of what we do and can do as CIOs is sort of show that, sort of the broadness of what STEM careers can be, and that it isn't just sort of, wearing a grungy t-shirt and like programming into the middle of the night eating Cheetos. It is, this other part of tech that is maybe a little more more up someone else's alley. So
oh, very good points. Thank you, Naomi. And actually that leads into our next question. We were talking about creativity. We've really been living in some unprecedented times. And so what's it been like to be a leader in these times? We know we have very different tenures here. We have a brand new CIO or at a brand new location. We have somebody that's been at a place for a lot of years. What have you ladies done this past year? How has COVID affected your work and your team?
So I'll jump in first, I guess. So I think for me, it was definitely unexpected that, about a month into my job here that I would be, facing something like this. But I think it sort of forced me to move a little faster and getting to know people and building relationships, because I didn't necessarily have the tenure and the knowledge of who's who. And so I felt like that was, something I had to do. And one of the things I decided to do personally for myself is, even though I was sending all of my staff home to work from home, is I decided to stay here. I felt like I was too new to really disconnect from the organization. So I wanted to be a visible leader, even though most of the time I was behind closed doors in my office doing it over Zoom. I was here, and I think that helped me get to know some of the other leaders. We also have a very small leadership team here. And so when we stood up our incident command, there were very few people that, really were able to manage through that. And so I think just being a resource to other leaders in the organization and being present and in that crazy time was important. And I think it did help with me getting to know the other leaders and the staff in a different way. Certainly hard to get to know people over Zoom, but that was what we did. We had daily huddles, made sure the cameras were on. I required it because I wanted to get to know, your expressions, all that stuff, those soft skills, those relationship building activities. Doing it over Zoom isn't great, but I think it's much better than nothing, and it worked out for us and for me personally as a new leader to really get to know others. We didn't have a lot of the infrastructure set up here. We didn't even have a real virtual access program for seeing folks. So, quickly ramping up on Zoom, training people on how to use it, making sure folks, even in our daily huddles, we're able to figure out the technology quickly. So I think it helped, folks get to know me and start to build those trusting relationships that you really need to have. And that's a big part of, how I handled unprecedented territory in a new job.
Yeah, I'm happy to go next. I feel like I had 3 areas that I had to focus on. The first was making sure that we could meet all of the infrastructure, very quick changing things that were needed. I was given 12 hours notice to get wireless network access onto the roof of the employee garage because we were opening a COVID testing tent on that Saturday morning, March 14th. And my telecom tech, when I said what we needed to do, he's like, we can't do that. I'm like, try again, get creative. We don't know is not an option. How can you make this work? And he pulled another rabbit out of his hat and got it to work. So we constantly, just every day, we were barraged with more things. But this is sort of the benefit of being part of an organization like Mass General Brigham, is so many of those larger things like getting Zoom set up and getting some of those other technology things were just delivered, and I needed to just execute and deploy them, which could make that a lot easier. Then there was managing the staff and their fears, and being at home with their kids and trying to work and do all of that. So trying to figure out how to balance and support them through this whole thing. But at the same time, I was leading a project to move 100 people from our office to a new office space that was just finishing. So we needed to get the movers there before the governor shut down non-essential employees. So that was sort of another wrinkle that we had, that our staff had to be in to make sure that we could get everything packed up and moved, because the movers were coming on March 20th. So it was quite a collision of everything all at the same time. It was just remarkable.
Beth, I think you, highlighted something so critical that probably everyone can attest to, is agility. And sort of, lots of us are not agile normally, like our process, we have process and we have steps and we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we sort of don't get to go live until, all of the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and all of those kinds of things. So I think for me personally, and then for, at Dana-Farber, I think learning to be agile and learning to accept that we're rolling out something without knowing everything. Like, we are just turning it on and we are hoping that all of you sort of do okay. That has never been in our vocabulary, and it was really a tough time for people to feel okay with the work. But it all worked out, right? Like it all did happen. And I think because we were, or still are, in a pandemic and in a crisis, people were accepting of the fact that we're rolling something out that we don't have all the answers for, but it will be better tomorrow than it is today. And we're going to just truly be agile and keep adding and making it better and different. And so, knowing that we were all in it together, I think, as Angie said, sort of like working together in leadership teams and sort of figuring out how to support one another, all those things sort of come together in a crisis, and at least have and continue to do at Dana-Farber in a way that you definitely feel like you have, each other's backs, and people were understanding of the fact that we were sort of rolling out technology that we really wasn't sure what was going to happen on the other end of it. And I think and as everyone said, trying to balance that with the fact that your staff who are trying to do this rollout are also juggling whatever else is happening, in their personal lives, or even, at the hospital, which staff can come in, who's been, exposed to someone. I mean, the rules early on were also sort of changing every day. So really being able to be flexible and sort of roll with things in a crisis, I think were skills that, you know, luckily I think for a lot of folks maybe just come out and they can figure out how to do it and they're okay with it. And hopefully that's how we got to where we are already. And acknowledging, you know, that people were struggling and still are. I think, you know, being authentic about, you know, the fact that my dogs might start to cry at the door, or, you know, your kid might walk through, somebody's cat is going to walk past the Zoom, you know, all of those things are happening to all of us. And sort of, I think, learning to be a little more agile, or accepting that, being flexible, and then just being accepting of people's you know, personal lives sort of intertwining in a way with work that you usually keep separate, are all things that we've learned to do well, I think, in the last, you know, 3 months, 6 months, that we wouldn't have done well with, you know, in January or last fall. And now we're realizing, you know, okay, we can let the cat go and just keep going on with the meeting. And I think those are, you know, critical things that we've all sort of come to learn.
I've actually come to enjoy seeing people's cats and things and hearing the dog bark, or when we have our staff meeting and kids join in and you see them in the video. I find it great. But I did also early on realize I wanted cameras on for folks all the time, because I feel like you're much more connected that way. But many of my staff who have young kids were feeling like they didn't want to be interrupted and have their kids running in the background or have the noise. So I made sure that they were clear that it's okay if in the middle of the meeting you need to mute yourself and turn off your video and step away for a second. You are being pulled in so many different directions that work can't always be the priority. You know, your young child needs to be taken care of. You can't tell a 3-year-old you need to be quiet while mommy's on the phone for an hour.
Right.
It just doesn't always work.
Definitely not.
Yeah, that's great. I think that kindness and that flexibility is going to really be helpful this time. I know when we talk about being agile and flexible, what we started to look at when we were making process changes, sometimes workflow changes multiple times a day. You know, you put something in place and realize pretty quickly, yeah, that's not going to work. Okay, what do we need to do? And having that flexibility, you know, we would just call it the MVP. What's the minimal viable product to move forward, take a step forward? If you take a couple of steps back, okay, that's fine. Let's get up, brush ourselves off, and figure out what's the next step. We had a really good incident command structure that we put in place that was led by one of our female leaders. Our chief operating officer did a wonderful job with that, along with our chief medical officer, did a great job keeping us on task throughout the whole our emergency response timing, which was really great. But yeah, we did really learn to, and back to your point where, you know, you'd have your people come and say, no, we can't do that. It's like, yeah, that's the answer. The answer is we're going to figure this out, and figuring out how to get all of our staff set up remotely in a quick time period, making sure that we had equipment set up and supporting that when we weren't used to supporting that sort of thing. It's a really big challenge, but I have to say that the team, and I'm sure your teams as well, have really stepped up in ways they couldn't even imagine. And knowing that it's been okay to fail. We are going to have failures, and that's okay. Let's just figure out what to do going forward. So what are some of the lessons that you all have learned along the way, and what might you do differently for our next pandemic?
I hope I'm retired by then.
Oh my goodness.
Well, I like to sort of say that we're not over this one. Like, I like to remind people that we're sort of still in a pandemic, and we're still in a crisis. And, you know, I think that that's some of the challenges, resiliency for staff, because it's now been going on for some time. And, you know, how do people, you know, how do you help build up the resiliency of your staff so people feel like they can get through another, you know, 6 months or a winter of this, or, you know, whatever, before maybe there's a vaccine or there's some sort of change in the world that does allow us to sort of return to some semblance of a different normal. I'm sure there will forever be aspects of our lives that are, changed because of this experience, but it's sort of not over. So thinking about, how do you help your team feel resilient that they can keep going in this mode for however much longer, and have it not feel like you're constantly in crisis, right? Because the pandemic's still here, but we can't live in crisis. I think really, talking to your team about it, making sure they know that you understand it and feel it and have these same challenges in your life, and thinking about what are the things you can bring in or bring back to our world to create some semblance of normalcy of like how it used to be. What are the things you can bring back? What are the things that will never come back? But don't lose the agility and the flexibility and to be able to respond quickly. That was awesome. Let's keep that part. But what are the other parts that we want to bring back to make people feel a little more comfortable and a little more resilient?
Yeah, I think being honest with them and really listening to make sure that you understand what their challenges are, because what some of my staff have for challenges are not the same challenges that I have, but making sure that I'm sharing what my challenges are so that we all know we're in this together. We may all come up with different ways to solve those problems. There's still a lot of uncertainty of, will we ever be back having meetings together, or will we be working remotely primarily forever? I mean, fortunately, my staff is really enjoying working remotely and not having to commute in. I have to say that for myself as well. It's been quite nice. But all of that uncertainty is just really hard. Balancing that with their fears for their families and trying to manage school age kids getting back to school and everything. It's just, there's so much that's out there.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think it helped, as things came my way that I couldn't answer, as it relates to, having a good relationship with infection prevention. I know that there's been questions. We have brought some staff back to the office. We're doing it slowly in a hybrid model like the schools. But I think just, making sure that we follow back up if they bring up a concern. That's really important. I think, air quality comes up, is that a safe place for me to work? Any concerns that come up, really trying to address them with the right experts, because I certainly don't know the answer to those questions. And I want to make sure they know that I'll go to wherever I need to go to get them answered. But yeah, there's a lot of those things that, are, I guess, come up, and every situation's unique. Some folks have those immunocompromised systems. They feel very uncertain. So I think just having constant follow-up and follow-through with each team member with any concerns that come up helps and will continue to help us as we navigate the future in the current pandemic and future pandemics too.
Yeah, I think communication is really key. Lines of communication are really important. So we have a couple of questions that have been submitted by attendees. So one question is, what is one characteristic that defines or means effective leadership to you?
I can start on that one. I think one thing that I have always found is helpful in people that I've reported to is really listening to folks. Like, you always hear you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should listen twice as much as you speak. I'm not always very good at that. I talk a lot. But I do try to listen. And I think it's really important. You can't understand, whether it's your staff or our end user community or anything, you can't understand what the needs are unless you really are listening. So I feel like that, to me, is one of the most important things.
I'll jump in, Alex. For me, I think consistent follow-up. I think that oftentimes everyone is guilty, too busy to reply to an email or return a phone call, but I really do feel like that means a lot to people. It means that you cared enough about what they came to you with, and that it's really something that you didn't forget about. And, don't get it right every time. I certainly do miss those emails sometimes, but I really try hard to get back to people when they bring something to me. And I think, I think they appreciate it. I think the staff really do.
Yeah, Beth stole my answer, so I will go with almost verbatim because I kind of talked probably too much myself. But and actually tied to what Angie said, I mean, I'd say, communication and also sort of some transparency. I think, I send a weekly email to my department, and sometimes they probably don't know what I'm talking about. And it's, it might be a joke, and it might be a story from the world, or it could be about Dana-Farber, or it could be about myself. So they probably know a lot about my dogs and my family, but it's also a way for them to see like who I am as a leader. And I think communicating with them about who we are as an organization, who I want them to be as part of my organization, communicating that vision and our goals, and tying us constantly to the mission of Dana-Farber. Those are the kinds of things that I think you forget that the staff member who you maybe don't even talk to very often is sort of looking to you for leadership. And some of that is talking to them and communicating with them and making sure they're aware that, you're thinking about them and their future. And that's sort of a simple way of doing it, and answering your emails from them and listening to them when you do meet with them are all, tied into that. So I think, I'd say communication is key.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think those are all great examples. And I think one of the points I kind of thought of when you were talking, Naomi, is more people are watching you than you realize. Mm-hmm. People are really watching your behavior, even when you think that you're invisible, you're really not. So modeling the behavior that you want your staff to have, show them your dedication to the organization, to your role, to them. I think that's really important. So really great. Another question is, if I want to grow into a leadership role, is it necessary to become a coder or an analyst? No. I have my master's. No, I have my master's in healthcare informatics and currently work as a product owner, but dabble in analytics, project management, and all the other duties. So it sounds like this person wants to develop into a leadership role. What should they be doing?
I feel like for me, the most important thing if you want to be into a leadership role is you need to tell somebody that. Don't be afraid to speak up and say, I would like an opportunity to be in a leadership role. I get that there may not be an opportunity today, maybe not tomorrow, but if there's one in the future, I would like to be considered for that. And I'd also like to know what I should do to prepare myself for that. That's always, to me, the number one thing is if you want something, don't just think someone's going to read your mind. You need to speak up and share that desire that you have, or you're going to be overlooked.
Very good point. Naomi or Angie, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, you don't have to be a coder. There's so many people that have come from different areas and led the person I actually just hired into a management role was a lab tech to start out, and so I think it's just that, interest, that desire to participate in maybe some IT project that you didn't participate in before, showing your interest, telling people your interest. And then, I think really trying to stand out when you're working on a project, go the extra mile, do the thing that maybe nobody raised their hand to do. Because you'll stand out that you really have a passion for it, and it'll show.
Yeah, I would say, influence without authority is just as important as authority, so to, if you're on a project, figure out how you can, lead a subgroup of a project, like show those skills and sort of use them and figure out how to work well with people. And, it isn't always about the title that shows you as a leader. And in fact, there are probably plenty of people with titles who aren't great leaders. So, be a leader without the title is sort of just as important to sort of have you be recognized to move up officially.
Great. So I hope we answered your question. Our next question is, as a career woman and some working moms here, how did you advance your career? I feel at times a working mom can get overlooked for projects or promotions because of family obligations. Have you ladies run into that at all? and how did you deal with it?
Well, I would say I definitely, I had a village, right? Certainly as a mom, I can't do it alone. And I certainly always leaned on people in my support system to help me if there was something I was working on, a project that I was working on, weekends. We've all had to do those things that aren't really convenient for family time. But I think you have to build a network of people that'll help you. And I think that, there are going to be times where, as moms, we have to leave our families to do certain things, but I think that shows you're committed to both, that you can have your family, you have the support system in place to help you. And we certainly need it because even in this past year, coming to a new job every day with 2 young children at home, trying to learn, a husband who's a teacher, trying to teach, all from the same place. I had to walk away to come to a new job. But I think, you make it work the best you can, and you have to rely on the people around you to support you in the best that they can.
So I'm not a mom, so I can't speak to that specific thing, but I do have a lot of moms that work on my team. And I think I would make the same statement of speak up if you're interested in a project or a promotion. Make sure that you're, showing that you have skills and a desire and a passion for that. And hopefully the right person will see that and allow you to move forward.
And be open to that growth. I think that's another thing is, if an area of growth is identified for you, be sure to look for ways to improve in those areas. We all have those areas where we can continue to improve. So our next question is more of a wide question. What do you think the biggest challenges in healthcare IT will be in the next 5 to 10 years? How about the next 5 to 10 minutes?
I think we've had enough challenges for 2020.
Yeah, we're tired, so yeah. I don't know.
I mean, I feel like the next one that we need to figure out is what's the future of our workforce and our locations going to be? So I think there's so much up in the air now. So for Mass General Brigham, we have our remote staff are working remotely through June of next year, but what's it going to be in the future? Are we going to be permanently remote is our primary location? And there's just so much that's unknown in that space that I'll be glad when we get some definition around that.
I think there's a lot to be said for, one of the things I'm charged with here is digital transformation and trying to make things easy, access to us easy for our patients. So I think that it's not that easy to do. We have, a lot of opportunities, a lot of products out there that can help us with that. But I think, really figuring out what we want to do as an organization so that when patients need us, we're easy to find, easy to use. They don't have to access us through multiple different apps and avenues, because I think our competitors in the non-traditional spaces are doing that. And I think that's one of the challenges that I can see that we'll be fighting against, at least in the access to us space.
I agree with Angie that I think, sort of the patient as a consumer and not treating them like a consumer, but being able to have tools that are similar to the consumer space, to the retail space, is a near-term challenge for a lot of places. I think for me, if I worry about, 10 years out, I think of things like AI, which I feel like we've been talking about AI since Matthew Broderick did War Games and 1980 something. But if we really think of it coming sooner than that, sort of actually really coming to fruition, I do think about how do we ensure that AI is helpful to our patients and helpful to our clinicians, but doesn't necessarily bring with it some of the baggage that I think artificial intelligence and social media has now risen to be a bit of, a negative. People are seeing it as more of a negative and not a positive. And so how do we use it well and thoughtfully and carefully? And I think, healthcare is usually behind the times, but we're behind the times because the patient is your mother or my sister or somebody's uncle, and that's who we're trying to take care of, and we have to be sort of more careful than, you know, social media companies probably. So I do think if I'm thinking long term, that's really what I think about. How will that impact our industry, and how will we think about that in the future? I think the other piece to the part Angie brought up around the patient and hospitals and consumerism is also, you know, underserved patient populations, and how do we make sure that our hospitals are accessible to everyone, and that all patients, you know, are able to receive the care that they need. Sort of, we're not excluding any aspects of the world or you know, our communities. So I think that's also a sort of near term concern for me from a technology standpoint, is making sure that technology is accessible to sort of all of our patients.
I think that's really great, and I'm glad you brought up the point of the underserved populations, because that's who we're dealing with at the health center in Lynn. And it's been one of the challenges with communicating with patients electronically, is overcoming a lot of those technical barriers. So it's really great to know the hospitals are working on that too, and hope we all continue to work together on that. One of the questions that came up, and I like this because I do a lot of reading, is what would you recommend as a good book on leadership? I have to say, I'm glad I'm asking you guys, because I'm blanking at the moment. I've read so many
I wish
books.
I was at my desk, because I have the books right there.
I'm going to turn around and look at my bookcase here.
So the one that's coming to mind, and frankly, I probably read it quite a few years ago, and now I'm probably going to get the title and the author completely wrong, but it was Jack Welch's book. Is it Welch?
Good, great.
Walsh? Good. The one about winning.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think, at least for me, you know, really that there's a, what I think that sort of book helped me think through are things like sitting at your desk and working really hard and being amazing is not enough. You know what I mean? Like, you have to, as Beth said, ask for it, talk to people, put yourself out there. It isn't enough to just, you know, sit at your desk and work hard. And so I think that was a book that sort of pops into my head as something where I feel like he definitely made his career, you know, with action, and not just action of sitting at my desk and doing a good job.
Yeah, I have one. I participated in a mentor program at Partners a number of years ago in the IS space that was really great. And they gave us a reading assignment, which was a book called Strengths-Based Leadership. And it had an online assessment tool at the end. I'm always up for a good online assessment tool. It's kind of like those quizzes in the magazines there used to be.
Yeah.
So I love all of those things that are going to give me a little insight into my brain. But the thing that I really liked about that book is it talks about all these dimensions of leadership, and that no one is going to be good at all of them. And it sort of compares it to a baseball team, is that just because you're a great first baseman doesn't mean you're going to be a great outfielder or a great catcher. Everyone has their skills, and that it's really important to build your team with people that have different skills than you do. You don't want everyone to have the same skill. But it also, I feel like, sort of lets you off the hook a little bit, because you may not be a great communicator. You can try and you can continue to work to try to improve that, but you might be amazing at strategic thinking and strategic planning. And so it's important to understand what your strengths are and not really beat yourself up about the fact of the things that don't come natural to you. You might have to work a little harder at those things, but then also to be able to surround yourself with people who are different and think different than you do, because if everyone thinks the same way, you're going to miss so much, and you're not going to be planning things appropriately because you all have the same mindset. So I really liked that book.
That's really great. I love the analogy about the ball team too.
Yeah, it was like very easy to read, and it was all different leaders in different industries that shared their experience and what they learned through their careers. So it's a great book.
Really nice.
But don't take quizzes on social media.
No, do not.
Don't do that.
This was a legit one that was in the back of the book with a special passcode. You had to buy the book to get the code.
Yeah.
Yes, those are the ones to take. Absolutely. So I would ask too our attendees, sometime during this or after this, if you could recommend books too, and we can make a list and share those with each other. I know two of the books that our executive team have recently read are The Good Job Strategy and The Dignity Model. And I know those aren't specifically on leadership, but for people that are in leadership, they give some good guidance on how to support and lead your teams. So let's see, we're getting close on time here. Let me find another question here. So what are the main challenges that you've had dealing with IT projects that were in progress or needed to be stopped during the pandemic?
They're all starting again at the same time.
Yes, not funny.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think, we did push pause on a bunch of things, and now it seems those things and other things have made it onto the list. So trying to prioritize, reprioritize with the list of things that have come in addition to what we had been working on, that's probably been my biggest challenge, and trying to make sure that, again, that I've not missed any leaders in the organization in terms of understanding their strategies for their areas. So I would say just managing the backlog and the incoming, but that's, to me, feels like a constant anyway. So.
Naomi,
Oh, yeah, I would just agree with them. They're all just coming back. I mean, some budget things were cut, but then for the most part, things are we're now just trying to figure out how to restart some things, but also restart some things where we're trying to provide, I shouldn't say we don't have on-site support. We do. We have technicians who are there every day, and I thank them all the time for being on site and being there for our clinicians, and fixing the things that can't be fixed remotely, and we're so thankful for them. But we're also now needing to do other things where more people are going to have to hop on site, and it's sort of, how do we have only a certain number of people going in, and you can't do things the way you used to do them. So even though the projects are coming back, we're having to find new ways of working with people and new ways of supporting them and letting them feel supported, because the people, on the front line at the bedside, we want that nurse and doctor and clinic assistant and imaging techs and lab staff and pharmacists, everyone to feel like we are still here for them and we still support them. But, you don't want to pay for me to have a mask, or you don't want me to be on site if I don't need to be for a true business reason. So I think it's restarting all the projects, but also navigating the new ways of working.
Great. We only have a couple of minutes left. So just to wrap things up, what's your vision for your future success?
So I can jump in and go. I think for me, we've talked a little bit about, what we think is happening in the next 5 to 10 years, but really, continuing to lead Dana-Farber through this sort of digital healthcare landscape, whether it's, clinical advancement or a lot of things with business operations, whether it's finance or HR, philanthropy. And as I said, I think personally, really being able to expand our reach to underserved patients with cancer, and really thinking about technology as a way to break down barriers to these underserved patient populations, and hoping that technology is, sort of the equalizer here, so that we can, reach as many patients as possible and ensure that sort of equitable access to care and hopefully survival for more cancer patients. So that's, for me, at Dana-Farber, and hopefully as well personally with my career at Dana-Farber.
Yeah, and I echo Naomi's comments that, I look to continue to grow and learn new things and add value. That's what I'm hopeful that I can continue to do to not only my team and our user community, and figure out ways to use technology to help provide better patient care. I think we've been able to do some amazing things during this, like even deploying iPads for patients when they couldn't visit with their families during the pandemic. And so there's, technology has played a huge role in support of this, and I see it only continuing.
I echo all those things. Certainly feel like I'm at the start of my journey here. And so, in 5 to 10 years, I hope that, I've helped transform this organization and the communities that we serve in an amazing way. I certainly hope to continue to build up the members of my team and help them grow, and get out there and try to help those young folks in the community and in the schools to help learn about what we do here too.
Great. Thank you, ladies. Angie, Beth, Naomi. I'm going to turn this back over to Melissa for her to wrap up quickly.
Thank you for joining our New England Himss webinar today, celebrating leadership in health IT. Please consider registering for our first clinical informatics webinar on Tuesday, October 6th at 5 p.m. It's going to be great. The CP Himss credit and survey will be sent to all registered attendees after today's call along with it. So thank you again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.